Okay. It is 7 o'clock. Bring the October 8th, 2024 Planning Board meeting to order. Karen, if you could do roll call, please.
Claudia Bogan.
Here.
Jim Callahan.
Yep.
Kevin Donovan.
Yeah.
David Edmonds.
Here.
Rob Klein.
Here.
Carolyn Turner.
Here.
Chair Bob Doherty.
Here. Before the meeting begins, please silence your cell phones and note that this meeting is being recorded. Up first, continued public hearing to amend the 1985 Woburn zoning ordinance as amended for a proposed zoning amendment for proposed zoning as follows. 1, amend the definition of mixed-use hotel/restaurant in Section 2 by inserting after 1 on the second line with or more contiguous. In addition, amend the lot on the second line to lots. And 2, amend Section 6, dimensional regulations, footnotes to 6.1.6, table of dimensional regulations, by adding the following footnote. 6, Woburn Landing, i.e. the parcel of land located 369 Washington Street, containing a mixed-use hotel/restaurant use. And representing the applicant.
Okay, thank you. For the record, Attorney Joseph Tabby, Rubin and Rudman, 500 Unicorn Park Drive in Woburn. Here on behalf of Madison Woburn Holdings LLC, who's the owner of the property at 369 Washington Street, known as Woburn Landing. And before I take you through the proposed changes and then the history of the section we're trying to be included, the bottom line of the zoning amendment is to allow for the ability to separate the hotel from the remainder of the property for financing or sale purposes. It doesn't impact any other property in the city of Woburn, doesn't result in any further development or the rights to do further development. It's something that we're looking to do, and you'll see where it has been done before. So the first request is to amend the definition of mixed-use hotel restaurant by inserting 1 on the second line with a more contiguous. So in addition, amend lot on the second line to lots, so that the amended definition would read a mix of hotel and restaurant uses in one building or in separate buildings on 1 or more contiguous development lot. And then the second request is to include Woburn Landing within the notes to the dimensional regulations, footnote 6.1.6, table of dimensional regulations. So the City Council continued public hearing on this matter is scheduled for November 19th. So back in 2014, the mixed-use retail definition was adopted by the City Council to allow for the final cleanup and development of the former W.R. Grace property. So today, the property includes a 110 grill restaurant. There's a dual hotel brand with Hampton Inn and Homewood Suites to the rear of the sites. There's a Chick-fil-A drive-through. The empty space next to 110 Grill, a special permit was granted to Starbucks. They moved from across the street in Cummings Park. They're expected to open around December. And then the former restaurant to the right, Press Cafe, was granted a special permit, and they're expected to open somewhere December around the first of the year. So those are the uses on the site. There's no further room to develop anything on the site. And again, as I said, the reason for this proposed amendment is to allow for the hotel to be on its own lot, but with all of the buildings as part of one development, similar to the Unicorn Park and the former Inwood Office Park that has been referenced. So we drafted the proposed amendment, similar to the amendments that were adopted in April of 2000 for Inwood Office Park and Unicorn Park. And I believe John was planning director back then, and I believe Claudia was also on the board. Inwood Office Park was designed as a master plan, 850,000 square foot campus-style office park on 57 acres of property on the Reading side of I-93. Unicorn is a first-class office park on the Stoneham side of I-93 with access off of Montfield Ave. Unicorn Park has 6 office buildings and a hotel developed on its site. So both of those developments were originally developed as one lot with the entire lot, all of the 57 acres up at Inwood, and then the, I think it's 20-some-odd acres, 30 acres of Unicorn, with an FAR at that time of .75 and open space of 30. At a certain point in time, around 2000, the city adopted changes to Section 1, reducing the FAR to .50 in the office park zoning district. And by doing so, they accepted both Unicorn Park and Inwood Office Park. So just for reference purposes, Inwood Office Park never went forward. The property was foreclosed on and is now residential. It was originally developed by Avalon Inwood, and then subsequently sold. The change would have put both Unicorn Park and Inwood Office Park in nonconformity as you looked at each lot. So going back to 2000, I had represented both Unicorn Park and Inwood Office Park. So in the case of Inwood Office Park, when you looked at the entire office park, the FAR was .45. The proposed decrease at that time affected 3 of the 6 lots. Lot 2A was .56, Lot 3A was .71, and Lot 5A was .68. In the case of Unicorn Park, the overall FAR was less than .5, but as you broke it down by lot, building 500 was .61, building 600, .61, and then the hotel lot was .6, all exceeding the proposed .50 FAR at the time. So City Council saw fit to accept those 2 office parks. And you do have some plans in front of you that I'd like to take you through. So the first plan is the plan of record for Woburn Landing. Okay, and as you can see, it shows the 2 buildings out along Washington Street. As you look at the plan, the upper building on the left, that's the 110 Grill and where the Starbucks is located. The one below that was where Red Robin Restaurant was that closed, and that's where Press Cafe will be located. And then in the middle, the Chick-fil-A, and then you have the hotel, dual hotel property. So the next plan shows the a conceptual A&R plan. So I'm actually having difficulty reading those numbers. I have another copy in here that I'll use. So when you look at the 2 proposed lots conceptually, they're outlined in red. So there'd be a separate lot for the hotel, and then there'd be a separate lot that would include the three other buildings. Now, when that happens, the usable open space for one of the lots goes down to 23.4, And the FAR on one of the lots goes up to 71%. So the zoning ordinance that was adopted back in 2000, allowed for Unicorn and Edward to remain at .75 FAR and not have less than 20% minimum landscape open space. This conceptual plan would be in compliance with the proposed footnote. Now, for illustration purposes, there's the, subdivision plan of Unicorn Park. When this was originally developed, it was owned by it was Vappy Construction that originally owned the property, developed the lots, then the park was sold to Metropolitan Life, and then over time, after this zoning was amended, most of the lots, actually all of the lots except for the hotel, were sold to a national development entity. Different entities own these lots. So for illustration purposes, I wanted you to see that this at one time was all one lot. Same thing with Inwood, when you see the various lots along the highway and Inwood Drive, that originally was all one lot owned by an entity of a gentleman by the name of Ed Callen, lost the property in foreclosure, and then was subsequently purchased by Howland Development in Avalon, who did a joint venture to develop the residential that was on the site. So the approach that we've used here with Woburn Landing is the same approach that was used back then. So again, this only applies to Woburn Landing, Unicorn Park, and it's kind of moot for Inwood Office Park because it's developed residential. So it's clear in number 6 that notwithstanding the above provisions, the following development sites shall remain exempt from same, and that by issuance of the necessary permits as otherwise provided by these ordinance, and further, that such development shall not exceed 75% FAR, nor have less than 20% minimum landscape open space, including Inwood, Unicorn, and now we're asking for Woburn Landing to be included in this section. So that's a summary of the proposal.
Thank you. Any questions? Jim?
So, on the page 3, I think it is, with the red dashed line separating the lots,
Yes,
is that gonna be the new proposed property line?
yes, that would be a news proposed property line, correct.
Okay, a couple questions come with that. The driveways, who owns the driveways?
I'm sorry, who owns what?
You have a driveway off Washington Street next to the old Red Robin, which is gonna be what, Press Cafe?
Yes,
Split down the middle, it appears. Looks like the property line is split down the middle.
yeah, so what typically happens in properties like this is that there's a reciprocal easement agreement. If you look at Woburn Village, Avalon Inwood actually owns their own property. Their property line comes right out to Mishawam Road. And there's an easement agreement between both parties that allows passing and repassing and parking and that type of thing.
Okay, so that agreement is in place already.
No, not yet, because this is treated all as one lot right now.
All right.
The zoning amendment gets adopted, then we would have the right to take it to the next step. And then, in addition, on top of this, we would have to have modified site plans approved by the city council, because the plan that you have, the plan of record is the site plan of record. So if we were gonna create 2 lots, we'd have to get approval from them on modified site plans.
It sounds like I'm getting a little ahead of myself, and the parking spaces and the open space measurements and requirements have been met.
Yeah, the parking would be met, and on one of the lots, Lot 1C, okay, which is the, let's call it the restaurant lot, their landscape open space would be at, I think, is it 33.4?
23.
The print is so small here, right, John?
Thank you.
You're
Looks
not
like it's
kidding.
a little bit under.
So it would comply with the existing ordinance that says you can't have less than 20% minimum landscape open space.
So
Then Lot 1D would be the hotel, and their FAR would be .71. That would be less than the .75 that's allowed in that Section 6. The parking, this was created so that there would be compliance with the parking.
So the drawing that I'm looking at looks like the original drawing with a dash line that's been overlaid.
That's a conceptual A&R plan, yeah.
Have the reference tables that are on this drawing been updated to match with the lots? So
Correct.
In other words, you reference Lot C, and there's one item that's highlighted in red. Everything else has been checked and verified, is that correct? In other words, as you subdivide these lots,
Yep,
all right, those components have all been checked out for a number of spaces, the area square footage that you just discussed.
yep. The only change Alan Major went out, and they went through several drafts of this conceptual plan. And this conceptual plan here, everything is in compliance, except, we're noted on the FAR for the hotel, and then the open space is at 23.4, which is higher than the 20 allowed under the section we're trying to get included in.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's it? Any other questions? Okay, seeing, yes, Caroline?
Joe, one of the issues that was raised previously by Mr. Quinn was regarding the potential impact on the existing special permits that
Correct.
were issued. Can you explain that and
Yeah, I
address
think
that?
what that would mean is that, there is a site plan of record, which is the first plan that you have. And we would have to have new site plans approved for the special permits that have been granted. So if we're allowed to subdivide this, we'd go back to the city council with a site plan that just showed the hotel. They would have to approve that. And then we'd have a second site plan that showed the 3 restaurants.
Okay, and that's what you were referring to previously with the second site plan? And that would address those issues?
That's my understanding.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
All set? Anyone else? See, Claudia?
So I'm just trying to understand the larger issue at work. And given that we're talking about Inwood, Unicorn, and then this development, would it be fair to say that when the developments are originally being planned, financed, and built, it seems to be all in one and one for all? And then later on, after it's built, in the turning over of the properties and portfolios, that's when this issue comes up?
Yeah.
Is my understanding correct?
No, the property hasn't been turned over. I think this is Mr. Dowdle who owns the property. The hotel needs to finance itself. And in order to finance itself, it has to be a separate lot. Okay, you just can't, it's part of it's part of 1, 2, 3, 4 buildings on one lot. A bank's not gonna come in and finance the hotel on a lot it doesn't own. Okay, so
So I do understand that, Joe. I guess let me ask the question again. It seems that when these developments are planned, this mixed-use sort of development, they're planned when all the lots are under one ownership, all the lots are being developed at or about the same time, and there's not an issue with lot lines, right? Because it's all sort of
Right.
all in one go. Then everything's built, and later on, it seems that that's when this financing issue comes into play, right? That you've got now a bunch of stuff on one lot, and then everybody who operates these facilities wants to do something different, and now that's an issue. So that's kind of my understanding right now. Am I missing something, or is that
No,
basically
you're not missing
accurate?
something. There's probably something we overlooked when we, prepared the original amendment to allow for hotel restaurant use, on one lot. We should have probably thought about contiguous lots, while looking at adjusting some of the dimensional regulations. But I think at the time, we were motivated to, finally develop, that particular property, that we didn't give it any thought at that time. That's the honest answer.
I appreciate that. So what we're really being asked to do here is to rethink two things. The bigger picture is to rethink the definition of a mixed-use hotel restaurant to be more in a contiguous lot situation rather than all in one.
Correct.
Okay. And that change would potentially impact more parcels, right?
That could, but keep in mind that it applies to the OP zoning district, and someone would have to develop just hotel and restaurant. Okay? But
But that amendment is designed to deal with what may have been overlooked at the time, which is going forward into the future, you can't finance a hotel/restaurant situation if they're all on one lot.
Correct.
That's your point. Like, when this all came in, it was unsustainable from the beginning, right, going into the future, because it was always going to be, given the financial climate and how business is done, right? That
I'm
at
not
some
sure.
point,
I wouldn't say
somebody
that.
has to refinance something and all of a sudden they're stuck. See, I'm just trying to understand the bigger picture before I get down to
Yeah.
your footnote.
I wouldn't say it was unsustainable from the beginning, right? You want to just go back, identify yourself, Dennis?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dennis Stoutle from Madison Properties. I wouldn't say it was unsustainable, but it was a very tricky zoning process because it was one parcel with limited frontage. Had 4 buildings to be able to justify the amount of off-sites that were required. That part of Washington Street is greatly improved because of the off-sites we did. So it was, I think, the right thing to do for the property, and the property's done well, and it's been well received by the city. So it was really just, now where we're at is financing and operating hotels a different business than restaurants. And so we're just trying to separate them out so we can treat them separately and finance them separately.
Well, that's, I didn't mean to be judgmental. I'm just trying to figure out, like, going forward, if this development were to come in new today, right? Instead of setting it up in the beginning so that you have this problem at the end, you might decide to do it a little different, or not.
That's a good point. We probably would look at it a little differently, but we had constraints over, site frontage, coverage. The hotel restaurant district didn't exist yet, so we created that. So there was a lot of things at play, and it was a lengthy permitting process through the city council. So we didn't try and throw too many things at it, and in retrospect, we perhaps could have given it more thought to try and do some of this up front. But
Okay. Because, I understand the footnote. I've just looked it up to see, indeed, Joe, I see your footnote. There's footnote 6.1 for Inwood Office Park and 2 for Unicorn Office Park, and you're just trying to get a 3 for this particular parcel with respect to dimensional, right? And I understand that. I'm just trying to get my head around what the one or more contiguous, do you see my point? Like, I'm trying to sort of understand that part.
Yeah, so if the zoning amendment is adopted, the definition has to change because we would now, it wouldn't fall under the hotel restaurant use. It would have to be 2 lots. That's why we are proposing contiguous lots.
Understood.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you got one without the other, then you wouldn't actually make, you wouldn't get there, is your point.
No, we thought it'd be more restrictive doing it this way, because we looked at, how do we approach this and how do we amend the zoning? And, I understand that, people want to see how it impacts other parts of the city, and we thought this was the most restrictive way to do it.
Okay. All right. I think I understand the proposal now. Thank you. I'm all set.
Okay, thank you.
Claudia.
Yeah.
David?
Does this affect any other property in the city that you can, you generally understand all the property in the city. I'm just wondering if, in your mindset, do you see this affecting anybody else?
Affecting,
Any other, do you see any other property that might have a similar situation like this in this city?
I'm not aware of any, but the way this is proposed is that, when you slot it in this footnote, it only applies to this particular property, along with, the former Inwood and Unicorn. The definition, yeah, if you have other office park district, someone has the right to develop a hotel restaurant use now by special permit in the office park. Contiguous lots, that means they could use, 2 separate lots and request a special permit for that. But the, let's call it the grandfathering, if you will, on the FAR and open space. Section 6 is very clear. It only applies to those properties.
But it is possible there could be a 4th footnote sometime in the future?
Yeah, I guess it's possible someone could have a, similar situation and decide to do what we've done.
Okay, I'm good, thanks.
Yeah.
All set? Anyone else? Okay, this is a public hearing. So I'd like to open it up to the public. Anybody out there that would like to speak for or against this amendment change, zoning amendment? Please come up and speak now. Seeing none.
Motion to close the public hearing?
Motion by Carolyn to close the public hearing.
Second.
Second by Jim. All those in favor? 7-0 carries. Do we have a recommendation?
I would want Mr. Tarby to illustrate what you would like us to do this evening, if the board would be so kind to let him do that. Would you like to state what you'd like us to do? This, I know this was supposed to be on the city council meeting last night, and was it, or was it not?
No, there was nothing on the agenda last night because we had originally requested that the hearing be continued to October 15th, but that meeting date already had, I think, 12 public hearings, so they pushed it out to November 19th. So most likely there'll be a committee meeting the week before November 19th. So, our request would be for the board to send a favorable recommendation to the council.
I don't have a problem with that whatsoever in the discussion tonight. I think help the board understand better what you're trying to do. I look at this as pretty much common practice. Things like this come up. And as long as they're legally allowed within zoning, if you need ZBA approval, you need to amend site plans. You know, you really have to be nimble with today's economic environment. And, you know, here, the owner of the hotel obviously needs to have a financing structure for this property that is in and of itself. And, you know, this happens all the time. You do have some great illustrations of how property had to be reconfigured for financing purposes in Unicorn. But you can go to any city in town that has economic development activity, and you'll see this type of arrangement having to be made. I mean, no one could envision what's taken place over the last 10, 15 years at the Woburn Mall. You know, that was approved for the Woburn Mall, and there was a building footprint with multiple tenants. And now you have multiple self-standing buildings throughout that I don't think anybody could have envisioned that happening over, you know, the last 20 years to that property. It's working, you know, and it's the same here. You have 4 buildings, and one of them happens to need to have a financing apparatus or structure so that, you know, they can conduct their business in the manner which they can finance it. So I don't see any problem. Favorable recommendation from this planning board to the city council. The city council will eventually move to have the applicant reconfigure through new site plans, revised site plans for the properties, and those actions will require further public hearings, and, you know, it'll go from there. Joe, do you envision any ZBA action necessary for?
Any what?
Any ZBA action involved with this?
No, I don't think so, yeah.
No.
No.
So, as a planning director, I don't have any problem whatsoever with the favorable recommendation if the board does want to move in that direction.
Okay, so staff is recommending sending a positive recommendation to the city council on the proposed zoning amendment as submitted. Claudia?
So, Joe, can you help me with one more thing? What I'm trying to do is figure out where mixed-use hotel restaurant, that definition appears in our zoning. So you mentioned that it only affects OP. So could you help me by taking me through where this definition, a mix of hotel and restaurant uses in one building or in separate buildings on one development lot, that definition that you want to
Yeah,
amend? So where
definition-
does it appear in here, so I can
Well,
flip
it's
to
in
it?
the Section 2, mixed-use hotel restaurant.
Okay.
And I don't have my ordinance with me, but I believe it reads, "A mix of hotel and restaurant uses."
Yeah, in
One
one
building
building
or
or in
separate
separate buildings.
buildings
No, that I got.
on
What
one-
I'm actually asking is where that definition shows up in our ordinance. Like how many places in our zoning ordinance
Oh,
is this definition a thing?
it's in the use table and in Section 2.
Okay, so I'm going to the
Section
use table.
5.1.
And I'm going to section, hold on. So the table of uses is gonna be in section 6, right? No, that's table of dimensional regulations. 5? So bear with me, because I hate to vote on things I don't 100% understand. Okay, what line is it? So table of use regulations, section 5. And
20A, I believe.
it's 20A. If anybody knows the zoning, Joe, you do. That's why I'm asking you. All right. Hotel and motel, oh, I see. Mixed-use hotel restaurant, added 10/9/2014, which makes sense. So it is not by right anywhere, right?
By
It
special
is
permit.
by special permit in the BD, the BI, the IP, the IP2, the IG, the S2, the OP, and the OP93.
Correct.
So part of your point, I guess, is that it's not by right anywhere, that if this definition was to be amended, then anybody who wanted to say, oh, look, the definition has been amended, they would come in one of these zoning districts, and they would go to the city council, right? And they'd seek a special permit, thinking, under this new definition, say it happens. Is that what would happen?
That's correct, yep.
Okay. And then, at that point, the city council can say yay or nay to a new development.
Correct.
Right, okay. And so I guess then the question becomes, if there were other developments previously permitted under the old definition, how would a new definition affect them, if at all?
Unless they have an issue like Woburn Landing, I don't think it would impact it at all. Okay? If they had a mixed hotel restaurant use, say, on 5 acres of land, and there was a contiguous parcel of 2 acres that became available, I guess they could, try to permit that for mixed hotel restaurant use and either keep them separate or combine them
And again, that would be by special permit.
by special permit. There's nothing allowed by right, yeah,
I see. So all roads lead back to the city council?
correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. Okay, do I have any more questions from the board? Seeing none, do I have any direction from the board? If none.
You know, before anybody makes a motion, that was an important point to make. You know, no one's usurping the authority of the city council who granted this permit. This isn't changing to a point where it now becomes the approval authority of the planning board, which would not be a special permit, it'd be site plan review in most instances. So that's an important point to bring out.
So, from a planning perspective then, John, through the chair, what I'm learning is that the way that our zoning ordinance was amended back in 2014 creates kind of a, not so dramatic as a ticking time bomb, but it creates a situation in the financing climate of 10 years later where that's going to be an issue. Fair?
Not specifically an issue, only if it becomes an issue with the corporate structure of the property, that, a hotel in this instance needs to refinance, and I'm just suggesting that that's what they need to do, and the financier is saying, well, we're not financing anything unless you're on your own lot. Thereby, where we can acquire the property in the midst of a default, and we don't have to deal with any other property owners or people that lease other parts of that property. So you
Yeah,
have
I'd
your own
imagine.
island.
Sure, I'd imagine that would be true, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is, if the point of this ordinance amendment in 2014 was to encourage this sort of development for policy reasons that the city council had in 2014, today, it's maybe not the way business is done or likely to be done in the future, so that if the city council wishes to have developments like this, they ought to consider this amendment.
Yeah. I mean, I look at it as, there's multiple buildings, there's limited frontage. How do you increase the density without necessarily going up in height in one particular structure? You spread it out on one lot. So,
Okay.
that's really the issue, increase the density with limited frontage. And if there was plenty of frontage, all these properties would be on their own separate lots already. They're in a situation now where they have to create this separate lot They're gonna have to get amended site plans and special permits that were previously approved. And ultimately, they go through that entire process, they have recordable decisions and plans.
Okay, so what that says to me is that by making the amendment to the definition, it essentially provides a way, if the city council so chooses, to allow developments to proceed or to stop them, one way or the other.
Yeah,
It just gives a different potential look to the initial plan that might be more in keeping with what happens 10 years down the road when business is done.
Yeah,
Right.
And this whole process requires us to hold this public hearing because it's a zoning change
Understood.
proposal, but the
Okay.
ultimate authority for approving any of this, it rests with the council.
Okay. Well, I'd be happy to make a motion. My motion would be that, to send a favorable recommendation to the city council if the city council, in their policy judgment, decides that, this is in keeping with their vision for development in the city. That's something that the planning board can't really speak to. So that's my motion.
Motion made by Claudia. Any seconds?
I'll second
Second by Dave. Any discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed, 7-0 carries. You. Okay, up next, right down here, the procedural rules governing the planning board. Everybody had a copy of what was done in 2023. Hopefully, they had time to go through it and make any notes for discussion now. Also, the director was nice enough to give us the procedures that Malden uses for us to look at and just get a general idea of what they're doing. And so with that in mind, I will open this up for discussion. First of all, I guess I will ask, did everybody have a chance to read it? All those that read it, raise your hand. Okay, all right, we can discuss.
So, Bob?
Yes,
Just through the chair. So this was a project that was started at my instigation after a particular court decision. And the point of that court decision was essentially to make clear the sort of public participation that a chair would need to allow at meetings. And I naturally said, oh, maybe we need some policies and procedures around that. And Tina was kind enough to put something together. So I just wanted to be clear that, yes, this was started in 2023, but nobody other than me and Tina and Ellen, our city solicitor at the time, made comments on this. But I just wanted to make clear that the point of this had to do with how meetings are conducted. And everything else just sort of came onto it, right? Because we didn't have anything about any of our procedures. So the Malden procedures are sort of perhaps stronger on the, ways that submissions need to be put together, but it doesn't really have anything about the actual conduct of the meeting itself, which was kind of my whole point for starting this. So
so
that was my sort of long way of saying the important part to me or to any chair, I would think, would be the part about meeting procedures.
So Claudia, I have a question. When you guys were talking about this, I thought one of the things that I heard last meeting was there was something in regards to, and I know I'm not making it up, but was somebody speaking, got cut off at a meeting or something, a public meeting? And they were told they had a certain amount of time to speak, and then they were cut off when it got to that time. Was it something did it happen recently at a
Claudia brought it up, the open meeting law. I think you said it was Southborough, had an incident recently where someone was cut short of their time of speaking in public, and it was found to be in a negative way in that law by the courts. So whether we agree with the duration of the person speaking, the length of time, as long as they're not going overboard, and there are measures that addressed it. That's what I recall of it, that you brought to our attention. It was something that came out through the state Supreme Court recently.
And was there some kind of a decision made,
There
or?
was a decision made, I mean, it
Okay.
was all verbal that was presented to us.
Because on this, I don't think there's really anything on here in terms of how much time you have to allow somebody to speak or not speak. And I thought that was kind of how this all came about to begin with. We were talking about that Southborough thing, and we were saying we probably should have something written in writing that dictates how the meetings are done. And I thought part of that, and I'm only bringing, that's just one thing that I'm just bringing up. I thought that might be why we started talking about this. Again, sometimes I make things up in my head, and when I do, I eventually believe it.
Should run for office.
So, you're not making it up.
Okay.
If you look under 4.5, receiving public testimony during hearings, and you go down to the last part, which is F, so that's where it says, Chair may limit each speaker to a specified amount of time. Each interested person to speak, if only briefly. That's where that is.
Okay. And I did see that, and I wrote down time to speak on the side here. But we really don't have anything in there. But my question is, could you legally put something in there and say that after 15 minutes, that's it, you can't speak anymore? And I guess that would be, we're waiting to hear.
So, the issue that raises is that that would be a limit that would be equally imposed on every speaker that doesn't, react to the content of the speech, if that makes sense, a time, place, and manner restriction as opposed to a content restriction. So say somebody has an opinion that is, say, not being expressed in a very polite way, in a perhaps non-measured way that causes some in the room to be upset or uncomfortable. Saying to that person alone, you have only 5 minutes, is not a uniform restriction. Do you see my point? And then letting people who are saying very complimentary things about the situation at hand have all the time they want. That's what we're trying to avoid.
Okay.
Right? And so the point of being upfront and saying the chair has the ability, if they look at the room and they say, there's 50 people here and you know everyone's gonna wanna speak, you'd say, okay, each person has this amount of time. And one of my comments was, it seems too narrow. As chair, I would like the ability to always have a time limit. I don't think I have the flexibility to only announce a time limit for certain hearings, because that might be seen as a content restriction. Do you see my point?
I do.
Like, we're sort of saying, hey, we have my experience anyway, that, the residents of the city have been, overwhelmingly polite and respectful and just want their opinions heard, which is utterly reasonable and what we're here for. But, one could have a potential situation, as happened in this city, where tensions ran high and some people were allowed to speak, shall we say, shorter than others because of the content of their speech, and that can get one into trouble.
The other thing Walden had in theirs, I think was in theirs, was if somebody's out of order out there, and to the point where they've actually got it, where they'll be escorted out of the meeting.
That's in these.
Is that in ours?
Yeah, that's in ours too. But, I'd just like to comment to help the conversation.
Yes.
To me, these procedural rules, they're exactly what they are. You know, you can't play a football game without rules and, you know, the ref calling the fouls and everything else. So a planning board planning board meeting should be conducted in the same manner, so that when we ultimately, and I think we will, ultimately adopt rules of procedure that we all agree to, then all we need to do as members and staff members is to make sure, pretty much you memorize them, they're only 11 pages, and that we conduct every meeting in that manner. And we're obligated to do that, now that there is a court decision in that regard, and that's what precipitated, you know, this work that three of you had done, but weren't able to complete. But now I think we do have an opportune time to complete this effort and get it on the books and operate each meeting in accordance with the rules of procedure. And, you know, will the public know the rules of procedure? As we go along, it's not up to them to really have to learn this stuff. It's up to mostly the chair of the planning board to make sure that the meetings are being conducted in accordance with these procedural rules, the ground rules for conducting our business. And we won't get in trouble if we stick to the rules.
Now, so we go through this, we adopt some of these rules, but there are rules.
Right.
They're not, I mean, this would go before the city solicitor, I'm sure, right? To see if it's okay to do this.
Yeah, I mean, most of this stuff is actually practiced in a common sense manner.
Right,
It's
but-
courtesy and respect and.
But I'm just looking at one thing here that I actually underlined. So many times we have public hearings that go over, you know, we do them one week, and then 2 weeks later, we get the same one. And a lot of times we have the same people come up, different people come up with the exact same point.
Yeah.
You know, water. Everybody wants to come up and talk, you know, how water's gonna affect their land or something. There is one thing in here, is that the chair should allow only new information to be presented at subsequent hearings.
And that's a good
So
point.
so if we adopt something like this, or we come up with something, I know this one we're just discussing now, would this allow myself or the chair to say, I'm really sorry, but at the last meeting, several people brought that point up already, so I don't want to hear it. Not to that extent, I'd have to come up with something a
No,
little
but
more
you-
polished.
Yeah, you would want to qualify as the chair to the audience. We've had this hearing, we've heard about traffic, we've heard about water, we've heard about drainage concerns. If members of the audience who wish to speak this evening have anything new that we have not heard yet, we're all ears. You know, please come up and state your case. But if, in your judgment, members of the audience, you know that the board has already heard about traffic, it's heard about water, stormwater runoff. If you know that we've already heard that in these public hearing proceedings, we would like to hear from people with new concerns, not concerns that we've already heard a lot of and understand those concerns.
So let's say I do that, and I say that before the meeting, and then somebody gets up, and the first thing they start talking about is all the things we've already discussed. And then I say, well, you know, listen, we really just want to get new stuff here, and
In
that
the
person could easily say to me, well, where do these rules come from? I said, well, we made them up.
No, they're right here, and you could,
We made them up, they're right here.
Yeah.
And that person could actually say to me, look, there's nothing official with those rules. I'm gonna stand up here and speak for this for as long as I want.
it could
Jim was
happen.
first, and then
Jim,
So just to expand on that comment, I think it may need to be modified a little bit. So if someone's talking about traffic, and it's been talked about all evening, you resume the following week. If they're talking about traffic, but a specific part of traffic that has not been brought up, that should be allowed.
Yeah.
So the topic matter should be tabled unless there's something specific that wasn't mentioned prior, that's all.
Anything new on that topic would be allowed to be discussed and brought up. And the thing is, I've been in cities before witnessing proceedings, and it can be pretty harsh for the public to really understand how, cities operate. Some cities, I'm not gonna put them all in the same basket, but, Woburn, although it's a city, really treats its residents, citizens, as if we're a small town, and I really think that's the best way to operate. We're not here to upset people if we can help it, we want everybody to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. And, if they have a better understanding of it, they're not gonna leave angry. And I think the goal of this board is to make sure, that the fewest people possible leave here angry, but rather they've learned something. That local government actually helps to govern and keep the city governance and operating in a civil, respectful, professional manner.
I couldn't agree more. David?
So I've seen it a couple of times on the State Board of Department of Education. Every meeting starts and says 5 minutes for people who put in their name in order to speak about any topic having to do with education. And as long as they're professional and don't get personal or vulgar or anything, they get to speak. And they all know that's how much time they have, and they have a little ding, when your time is up. Now, on the other hand, I'm also on the electrical board for the state, and when we went through our CMR changes, we had to have public hearings, and the board chair at the time made a decision and said that we will only take, I'm gonna make a number up, 3 minutes of testimony from each person, because there was a substantial number of people, and it worked very well. The only question I have is about, how are you really able to say you can't speak again? We've never had a meeting, not recently, that ran forever. I mean, John, we know we had some that ran until we were wearing our pajamas when it was over. But, most of the time, people come in 5, 10, 12 people. I don't think we really run into that issue of if somebody, because we've this year had people get back up and say, at a public hearing, they wanted to add something. And we said, come on back up. We let all the people speak as much as they wanted to speak, and I don't know if I am in favor at all of putting anything at all that curtails, as long as they're being professional, as long as they're not being vulgar, that curtails the citizens or non-citizen, anybody that lives in the community, wanting to have a comment on something, and even if we continued it and they said, yep, I want to talk about traffic again, because traffic is important to me. I don't know how we could stop them.
Well, I don't think, when I look at this, I don't think of this necessarily stopping them. What I think is that you look out, and if there's 100 people in this room for a particular subject, I think that's when these things would come into play. When you're trying to keep control over 100 people,
Yeah.
and you don't want 90 of them coming up and saying the exact same thing.
I'm not sure you can stop that.
Well, I think you can maybe just say, look, I mean, I don't know if I've ever done it, and I know everybody here has been chairman at one time or another, but I've heard somebody say, do you have something new to add? Like when someone says, can I come up and speak again? And it's like, well, do you have something new to add? Rather than coming up and saying the same thing you just said 5 minutes ago. And it's always, yeah, I do, I forgot it, though. Okay, come up. Claudia?
So I wanted to address Dave's point. The issue of as long as you are civil, respectful, all that, that is a content restriction. And so that is actually part of the point of this case. Part of the point of this law, this legal case, was that the people in the audience were becoming quite heated. And the board members were starting to feel on the brink of unsafe. And the issue was, at that point, can you stop the discourse of particular speakers? And the court basically said no. And so that's the issue of having a content-neutral time limit for all speakers, because that point that you made, as long as they are being civil and respectful, that is the thing that is the content restriction.
But I wasn't thinking of it as, I mean, we've had people in here get angry over the years, and we've had them get up and storm out. We can think of who they were because we remember, because it doesn't happen that often. I mean, isn't that just American discourse? You know, I mean, I can't, when I say integrity or acting in a proper way, I'm just thinking they're not saying, I'm gonna kill you when you go out of the, you know, I mean, we don't have that happen. But at least I haven't run into it yet. We are being taped, I might find it next week. But I just don't see how we can stop somebody, even if they wanted to speak 6 times on the same subject, you know? I mean, we've never run into it. And we've had some very interesting characters in here over the years. But we've never run into that where, you know, I mean, we've always said, sure, come on up, speak.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, John.
Yeah. To add to what David's saying, I can't, you know, at 67, okay, I have to say, I'm a lot more mellow. I think I can help to calm any situation that may be getting out of hand a lot better than I did 20, 30, 40 years ago, where, you know, things did get very heated, and I don't think 40 years ago, or 30 years ago, I helped to calm things down. In retrospect, I wish I had the wisdom and experience that I have today. But, you know, the older you get, the more experience on this board you have over the years. I think you have the ability, you know, people have the wisdom to try to calm any situation that may be getting out of hand because of the issue we're dealing with. You know, 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, we may have a public hearing we're not even anticipating that's going to get a lot of people riled up and in here and concerned about, you know, dating back to the 80s, we had a lot of those and a lot of really excited people. And, you know, it didn't get out of control because we did have mature people in the audience and on the board and calm things down. And the whole idea, I think, with our proceedings is people have to realize applicants would not be before us if they didn't have the laws allowing them to apply for the uses, whatever it is, subdivision, A&R, special permits, site plans. You know, they wouldn't be allowed to come before us if there wasn't a zoning provision allowed for through state law, the Constitution, to come before us and ask for permission and whatever that may be, and whatever the role of the board is, whether it's a recommendation to the city council or we're the permit granting authority. People have to realize that. You know, we're not here entertaining applicants that don't have the right to apply for their use. If they didn't have the right to apply for the use, they couldn't come before this board. They couldn't come before the council, you know, if the laws didn't provide for their application. So the general audience, that's the one thing they have to understand, is that no one's coming before us asking for something that a permission can't be granted or recommendation given by this board, and whatever the matter is. A lot of people think that, you know, we give out permits to unlawful uses, and it's not the case whatsoever. We don't have that type of authority. And, you know, there's just simple understandings of local government that a lot of people don't understand. We understand them because we practice them on a regular basis. And, a lot of people just don't understand why we're here and why we're listening to applications that they may vigorously disagree with. Well, we're here because we're representing the law and what people have the right to apply for. If we are the permit or recommending body, they have the right to come before us, and we have to hear them. And the people in the audience that might disagree with the whole process and those applications, they have the right to speak, but they have to understand, we're not lawbreakers here. We're facilitators of the law with applicants that are applying for permits that, again, we're either the permit granting authority or we're the recommending body to another local tribunal. My 2 cents.
Thank you. Looks like a nickel.
I thought a quarter.
Claudia?
So through the chair to John, when this issue first came up, this came up right after the particular court decision that, because I read them every day when they come out, so it was probably right afterwards. So it's been over a year later. I would wonder whether other communities have dealt with the particular concern of mine that started this process with amended rules, for example. So I know at the time when Tina and Ellen were looking in 2023, there hadn't really been any time yet for other communities to react to the Supreme Judicial Court's decision. I wonder whether others have, and I wonder what they've done on this particular issue. And I don't know whether someone like MAPC or the National Association of Solicitors, I'm sure there's a state municipal solicitor sort of body, would know what has been done in other communities in response to the particular concern I had as chair at the time. Would it be worth reaching out to see?
And I think the best body to refer to would be the Mass Municipal, or even the Department of, not the Department of Housing, it's the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, to reach out to them, the AG's office, just to see, what is going on as a result of that court decision. And again, not that it's rare these days, you see it in the news throughout the country. There's a lot of disturbances going on in public meetings, whether it's school committee meetings or city council meetings. There's an awful lot of disturbance in uncivil actions going on. So I'll check. I read through a lot of internet stories, but it hasn't sparked a lot of attention, this particular court case, because I think it was a community in Massachusetts that, a situation got out of hand and it led to a court decision. A lot of these disruptions don't lead to court decisions, but this is one that I think every community should address. And I think it was a good exercise that you started, and I think I think it would be in the best interest of the city to have us finish it, complete it, and put, our rules of procedure in the form of a booklet
Yeah.
that we can draw upon.
Sure.
When we need to.
So I know that Ellen, when she was city solicitor, had access to her, city solicitor group that got a lot of information on this issue. I wonder if, John, you could do me the favor of interfacing with our current city solicitor, Mark Salvati, to see whether there's been any, movement in his realm
Yeah.
on this issue in the year and something that has elapsed since we started working on this.
Yeah.
That would be useful for that particular point. Because, for example, if I look at, Malden's rules that you passed out, regular meetings shall be held, this is just memorializing what we've done ourselves for the past almost 30 years for some of us. So that's pretty cut and dried. That shouldn't be
Yeah.
that much of a heavy lift. But it's sort of the conduct of the meeting part that might be trickier.
Yeah, everything we're doing, meeting-wise and procedural-wise, is really second nature. especially with yourself, Claudia, as an attorney, and you've been here for how many years, you know, and most people here have been here long enough that this is second nature. We know how to conduct the business. It's just that when you do have a heated situation, we now have a court decision that, you know, helps us better understand what we're supposed to, what our limitations are of how we can conduct business under those circumstances.
Because if we were to, you know, go through this page by page, like, you go to the first page, right? You know, there's probably not a lot of members here that would disagree with the whole lot on the first page, right? It's kind of like, you know, the chair shall vote and be recorded on all matters, you know, in the event of the absence, refusal, or incapacity of the chair, the vice chair shall act as chair. And then, this is new, if both the chair and the vice chair are gone or incapacitated, we wouldn't want that, of course, the remaining members shall elect a chair pro tem by majority vote of those in attendance. Well, that's a great idea, right? That's never happened in the years I've been here, but okay. So, you know, you look at it page by page, right? And there's, you know, most of it is like, yeah, okay, I'm good. And then, that happened once?
I think it happened once where we were missing the chair and the vice chair. The former chair got up and sat as the chair.
Was that me?
I think it was.
Oh. Looky there.
But every T has to be crossed and every I dotted relative to what's supposed to happen if this happens, you know. That's why it can take forever, but in Congress, you know, it just goes on and on pretty much forever. If this happens, and this happens, and this person's not here, and that, you know, and as you see in Congress, and they constantly make sure they adhere to their procedures. You know, you have 5 minutes. That's it, all right? And everybody adheres to that, and there's a decorum that they try to adhere to.
Well, I think that's the sticking, I mean, that's what we've talked mostly about tonight, right? That particular piece of it. So we might need to spend some more time thinking about what all the members are comfortable with in terms of time limits. Is that something that's done for every hearing? Is that something that, you know, people are comfortable with or not comfortable with? You know, that seems to be more of the hot button issue. But, you know, like I said, like, you know, we can look at the first page of this and say, okay, you know, we're good, and then we move on to the second page to actually make rules and procedures happen instead of getting hung up on the thing that is kind of the hardest. So,
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make a point. I don't have an exception or a problem with any of the language, and I've read through the draft a couple of times. I'm just wondering, Claudia, have you thought of any exhibits that should perhaps be included or addendums to the procedures? When I read through it the first time, I had a couple of suggestions for, you know, for the board to consider an addendum to the procedures so that it better explains certain circumstances within the procedures.
I have given no thought to that.
Yeah, that's the only,
I'm on-
that's the
being
only
honest.
exception that I had to what has been drafted so far. That it may help everybody better understand and have a better crib sheet, and I'll just call the procedures a crib sheet of, hey, this is the situation we're talking about. It's addendum A, you know, or addendum B, C, and D.
Rob?
My question would be, just going off the time limit that we've been talking about, if we were to set, say, 5-minute, you know, arbitrary amount, if we weren't enforcing that regularly and then when it became an issue, we did enforce that, does that set us up for some sort of an issue or repercussion if we chose to enforce it at some times and not others? You know, obviously, if there's 5 people here, it's not a big deal, but if there were, like we were saying, 100 people, we did enforce it. Obviously, common sense-wise, it makes sense, but if we don't enforce it every time, does that cause an issue down the line?
I would think not. And I like what we were talking about, in which it's up to the chair to kind of determine whether or not somebody can come up and speak for a half an hour, or whether they only have 5 minutes, and it would probably be determined by how many people are in here trying to speak. And the chair would have to let everybody know that this is what we're gonna do, because there are so many people here, and we would like everybody to be able to put their 2 cents in. Therefore, we can't allow anybody to go on longer than, say, 10 minutes. I do, yes. Go-
Can I speak?
Yep.
There's-
Yeah,
I did some research online, and it seems like a lot of planning boards will, set up a limit in the beginning, and they'll say, like, you have 3 minutes to speak, and if you need to, if you have additional information that you weren't allowed to say, or didn't have time to say, you submit it in writing. That was one thing. The other thing, there's a really good website, it's MMA.org, it's the Mass Municipal Association, and they have a really good, handbook, that one whole chapter, I think it's chapter 2, it's public decision-making and community engagement, and they have, great information on like open meeting law and, all sorts of different things.
Okay.
Which I think might be helpful if anyone has time to, like, review it. They also have a, like an online, like where you can share information, like Ellen would share, like, ask questions to that, discussion board, like with the MLA, the Mass Municipal Law Association, and get ideas from other people, what their towns do.
you,
But I know another thing they say is one of the main things is to manage, the meetings efficiently, you have the right to limit the time that they speak. If that makes sense. I can let more.
thank you. The other thing's on here, which I've never, it says, this is on page 4. The chair or the chair's designee shall draw up the agenda for meetings.
Well, your designee.
No, but I guess, so would the director be, or the planner be the designee?
Yep.
Okay,
That's how
Okay.
this city has operated, but in other communities, the staff would go over with the chair, the proposed agenda. And the chairman would actually agree or amend the draft agenda,
so we've been
as
getting,
you saw fit. That's your authority,
we've been getting shortchanged here.
for a long
I
time.
guess so, yeah.
The community I just worked for, the chairman had the last say.
Okay. Well, I like the designee part. Yeah, I think we'll
It
probably,
causes more involvement.
probably leave that there. So, I think we're all interested in this. Everybody wants to, it's a good idea. I think we all agree it's a good idea to get it done. Other than having a meeting like this, I don't know whether, I'm gonna throw something out there, but, so that maybe, we can do some more here, but if everybody could take, everybody has a copy of it, right, in hardcover? Okay. If you'd, rather than, and correct me if you think I'm wrong here, rather than just every couple of weeks discussing this, if everybody could just take their hard copy and make notes where they think things should be changed, what they would like to see wording changed or something to, and then submit them to, you could submit it to the planning board's office.
Or, just email them to Karen, right, Karen? Yeah.
Well, you could email them
She
to
won't
Karen, but
lose
that's only if you have these in an email copy. And does everybody have this? Oh, you do, don't you? You all use computers, huh? Yeah, that's right. Okay. So you could make the changes on, then email it
Yeah,
to Karen.
but, Mr. Chairman, but more than welcome to come into the office and drop off hard
Okay.
copies too.
And
correct?
then,
Yes,
yeah.
anything works. Love visitors.
and then what if Claudia would have the time, I know that Claudia is very busy, her and I could actually get together at the planning board's office a particular day and go over the suggestions and everything, and then implement what we think it is, and Karen can print it all up as a new copy and we might be ready to go.
So,
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, just to get it straight,
Yes.
You're assigning a real homework assignment.
I am, yes.
Everybody in agreement? All right. When is the assignment due?
You're right, you know, teachers always did give you a due date, wouldn't they? I would say I'd just like, so our next meeting is in 2 weeks. So if you could get it to the office in 2 weeks, doesn't mean we're gonna look at it in 2 weeks, but if you get it there in 2 weeks, then, once you get it there, so I would say, let's get it there in 2 weeks, 2 weeks from today. And then, Claudia and I will discuss and see when we can possibly get together. My schedule's a little freer than hers, since I'm retired. And then come back with a copy of what you have all suggested and what we thought should actually go in there. Does that sound like a plan? That's why we're planners.
Would this ultimately be public and posted on the planning site, you think, or would this be, just for internal?
Well, it would be a public document.
Yeah.
You know,
I'd say you
anybody
probably
can ask
could
it.
put it on the planning board site.
Right, oh, yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
That's
It'll
what I
be
was
on
thinking,
the
it would be good,
website.
because we could reference that if anyone had any issues.
And we'll have somebody come in here and teach us.
Okay, anything else on this for the moment?
Wait a minute, that's right.
We are good, excellent, good job, good discussion. Okay, up next is the planning staff update.
The staff update on everything
Well,
out there,
no,
or?
no, it's 3 lines here, that's good for me.
Yeah. No, that had to do with what we just talked about for the last 40 minutes.
The other thing John had mentioned was that, right now, we don't have a lot of things on our schedule, we don't have a lot of things, and, we're still scheduled to meet every 2 weeks. But if the whole thing keeps like this, and we don't have a lot, like, I don't think anybody wants to have meetings just for the sake of having a meeting. So, what John and I had talked about a little bit was, and I think we do this in November anyways, and we probably do it in December, is maybe just have 1 meeting a month. So for November and December, it takes care of itself, because if I'm not mistaken, we don't have one the week of Thanksgiving. And then we don't have one the week of Christmas, and those are usually that would be the second meeting week. So in November and December, unless we need something special, we're probably gonna have 1 meeting. And then at that point, we can see what we have on the agenda for January and maybe even into February, and decide if we only need to do 1 meeting each month then.
And if I could elaborate, so everybody
Yes.
understands, so Karen is in tune with this on a daily basis, and I'm always checking in with Karen on a daily basis of the applications coming in. We can always foresee when we're going to need, at least a month out, if we're gonna have to have 2 meetings in a particular month, in order to conduct our business in a timely manner, and that we're not jammed in that 1 meeting, going past our deadline, which would be in the procedures, 11 o'clock. So what I'm really concerned with, if we know the meeting is going to be light to a point we can conduct all our business in an efficient time manner at 1 meeting, I think as a board, we're better off doing that to respect everyone's time and to figure that out well in advance so that you can, as board members, plan your months accordingly. We've had probably 3 months now where we've had really light agendas, no fault of anyone, it's just that plans take a long time to hammer out and get squared away and ready for the board's review. So until those plans are at that point, we really shouldn't be dealing with applications until they're complete. But between Karen and I, we can manage this and well inform the board in enough time that you're able to better manage your schedule, a month out. So if we know we can do everything in 1 meeting, no surprises, we'll have a 1 month or a meeting, one meeting a month, and go from there. This happened in in Hudson, New Hampshire, starting in 2007 or 8, when the economy really slowed down. We ended up having one meeting a month, and that's the obligation in New Hampshire law, that every planning board must meet once a month. And that continued on for 8 years, till I left. You know, they were meeting once a month and conducting all the business in that time frame. So
Bob, through the chair to John.
Yes.
So our next meeting is the 22nd of October, and everyone has their homework to get done,
Yeah.
so that we can actually get that project completed. And then the meeting after that would be
the second Tuesday in November.
the second Tuesday, because the first Tuesday is Election Day, right? So that would be the 12th.
Yeah.
And is that the only meeting in November?
That, that's what the chairman and I were talking earlier. It would be more on a traditional basis, that we wouldn't meet the week of Thanksgiving. But again, that's the board's prerogative to do that or not. And then one meeting in December is the, you know, traditional schedule of the planning board.
Okay, and is that currently December 3rd?
It would be
The
the
10th.
the 10th.
The 10th, okay. All right, sounds good.
So you have the next 2 months, you can plan your schedules accordingly.
Great, much appreciated.
All right.
Anything else on the update? That's good.
Just that there are a lot of city activities going on, and the redevelopment authority has been active in the downtown area. I don't know if you've been following local events, especially with the city council, the downtown so-called Dome property, the old gas station with the Capitol Dome, that's coming up for a vote in the not-too-distant future for the redevelopment of that property. The city council's been working very diligently on a better design than what was originally proposed, and the applicant's been working with the council on that, you know, to make sure that the building that replaces that is conducive to the overall scale and character of downtown and aesthetic attributes of downtown. Then, let's see, Montfield Avenue, they're trying to finalize that particular project for, I believe it's 6 units of housing, 6 or 8. Do you remember what the actual number is? And it's a small amount of retail involved with that, too. Recently, the city acquired the Wyman School property from the school system. And, you know, the city's in the early stages of planning for the future use of that property. And I say early stages. And the same with the fire station at Central Square. The city's in the process of proceeding with a public bid for that property. So that'll be going up for auction. And there's a million other things that are going on that if you want to come by the planning board, we'll be more than happy to talk to you about, give you all the inside skinny, I guess.
Thank you, John. Any other thing that needs to come up before us? Seeing nothing?
Minutes.
Oh, the minutes, jeez.
Season starts.
Sorry about that.
I didn't print them out because I had emailed them electronically and I thought we were
that's
gonna try to go paperless. But, so if you don't wanna vote on them tonight, you'd rather have them printed out, we can hold them off till next time.
Well, did everybody read
Yeah.
them?
Yeah, because everybody's now going electronic.
Well,
My computer died. You know how hard it is to read those things on this thing?
I would make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
We have a motion on the floor from Claudia to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Do I have a second on that?
Second?
Second by Carolyn. All those in favor? All those opposed, 7-0 carries. Seeing nothing else,
I would make a motion to adjourn at 8:29.
Claudia has
Second.
Motion adjourned, seconded by Dave. All those in favor? All those opposed? 7-0 carries. Thank you very much.